Considering Halloween is only a few days away, Sarah and I thought we'd talk about little blood-sucking creatures. And by that, we mean ticks. Anyone
Not
who's lived in
actual.
Australia for a fair amount of time knows about these revolting little creatures. Welcome to Mother Doctor Nurse, another episode where we bring you what you need to know as parents and caregivers of young children. So for those of you who haven't met us, my name is Dr. Deb Levy. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm always joined by the wonderful, knowledge-filled Sarah Hunstead of CPR Kids. Have personal to share as well as all our knowledge. And we seem to have lost Sarah. I don't know if you have as well. There you go, Sarah, you're back. Can you hear? Are you okay? Great. Just disappeared for a second there.
Oh, sorry about that. No, all good here.
No. So let's get started all about ticks. So before we do that, I just want to say we are happy to take questions at the end. Obviously, we cannot give any personal medical advice, but just type away in the comments and also just say hi, let us know where you're coming from. And we're always very, very happy to answer your questions in terms of what else you want us to talk about. So just send us a DM or, hello. Should we dive in?
Let's dive in, Deb. Now,
okay.
Sorry, I'm just having issues here. So let me solve that.
Yeah.
Deb, you start talking and I will solve the issues on my end.
Okay, so what we're going to chat about today, as I've said, we're going to talk about ticks. So we're kind of going to divide it up between us. I'm going to chat about the problems that ticks can cause, and then Sarah is going to share wonderful advice on how to do. So, oh, I'm back. Both of us went for a second there. It's okay. Can someone in the comments just send a wave or something just to let us know that this is actually broadcasting? It says that it is, but I wonder because we keep on cutting in and out. But I'll keep on going. So what I was trying to say is that the way that I look at the problems that ticks can cause, I kind of divide it into three categories. One is tick-borne diseases. And by this, I mean like a bacterial infection that ticks can carry. It's not necessarily that they manufacture the bacteria, but what they'll often do is they'll carry it from an animal who's got it. And then when they are, I guess, essentially burrowing and biting into you and injecting their saliva in order to suck your blood, yes, we told you this is a Halloween issue, and then they will inadvertently introduce the bacteria into human bloodstream. So, those are things like Q fever, rickettsial illness, at least. It very much depends on what tick and what area you're in. And, Lyme disease is also part of that. So, I'm not going to go into detail because, quite frankly, it's way beyond the scope of both my knowledge as well as this talk, because there are just so many different types and nuances. I will, however, mention the classic symptoms that often that it'll fall into this. So I guess the first thing to note is that it doesn't happen immediately. Usually it's days after the tick bite, and it'll confusingly look just like a typical viral. A viral prodrome. So your child just may not be feeling as well, maybe a bit cranky, may have a fever. They could have a headache. They could develop a rash, sometimes joint problems. So, really the list of symptoms is very long, which is why it's always important to look for ticks so that you suspect that the symptoms can be caused from a tick. And we'll circle around and come back to that. So that's kind of your tick-borne diseases in a nutshell. The other thing I mentioned was tick-borne paralysis. Anyone who has a dog knows, is probably more familiar with this than people. And it's something that we need to be aware of because it essentially causes just that. It causes paralysis, and that can obviously be very, very significant in terms of the impact. So any neurological symptoms, your child suddenly being more clumsy, not walking properly, tripping, those would be the first signs that I would see an unsteady gait. Then we move on to the third category, which is allergies. I'm going to talk about there will be a degree of low irritation if you have a tick bite, or if your child has a tick bite. And that is simply because when the tick attaches, what it does is it burrows in with its little feelers and little, I don't even know what it's called. I'm just making up what it's called. And what it does is, as it's burrowing in and it's injecting the saliva, that is what you get local irritation to. So it's foreign material, and the local irritation is usually redness. It may be itchy, it may be painful. The next step on from that is when those, I'm going to call them allergens, because essentially it's just something that the body is mounting a response to. And what can happen is those allergens can actually enter the bloodstream. And if those allergens enter the bloodstream, they can cause an allergic reaction in some people. And what's an allergic reaction? It's exactly what you would see if they were allergic to peanuts, for example. So they can go through the whole process of actually developing anaphylaxis from a tick bite. Usually that would be a couple of hours after the tick bite, but again, it can vary somewhat. So if your child is anaphylactic to ticks, you would know about it because they would have had a very frightening reaction. And we have done other talks on anaphylaxis, which you can go back and revise all those symptoms. But essentially, they then get seen by an immunologist. The diagnosis isn't as clear as a food allergy, for example, where it's most often diagnosed on a skin prick test. Those sometimes aren't as sensitive with ticks, and often it's needed. Often a blood test is a little bit more telling, but usually it's on history. And then you'll have an adrenaline pen. You know, the two brand names in Australia are EpiPens and Anapens, and you will be trained in how to use those. So I'm not going to go any further into that. There's also this other unusual category, and it's called Australian mammalian meat allergy. And Australian, this is, I believe, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, we identified it here in Australia, and I'm using the very royal we because I had nothing to do with that. So what it is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Basically, after having a tick bite, your child or an adult will develop an allergy to red meat and to gelatin, which obviously often comes from meat products. And what the thought is, what the hypothesis is that there is a certain molecule that is in the tick saliva that's also in these products. So again, it's just developing an allergic response to that allergen that happens to be in red meat as well. How do you know if it's going to happen? You don't. How do you recognize it? Well, it's the same signs as any allergy. Again, the other confusing part, I've just gone dark again. Again, the other confusing part is that it's not always present when your child eats red meat, and it doesn't seem to be dose dependent either. So it's a bit of a funny one, Sarah, in terms of its predictability and its pattern, but it does exist, you know. So there you go. So just to recap, the three main things that ticks can cause are tick-borne illnesses, which are fairly rare, tick-borne paralysis, which is thankfully even more rare, and then tick-borne reactions. So either your little local reaction or your allergic reactions, which can either be systemic or and just related to the bite, or purely related to that secondary allergy to red meat. Present dog.
That's it.
My puppy is recovered, and then I don't have to have her here with me because she disturbs us all the time.
That's all right. And what I find really interesting about the mammalian meat allergy as well is that the prevalence is actually increasing. So the person who did, discover and has done a significant amount of research into this is Professor Cheryl Van Noonen. And what I will do is pop in the comments below the Tiara website, which is a just absolutely fantastic resource when it comes to to everything from how to remove a tick, preventing tick bite, and also all about mammalian meat allergy and tick allergy as well. So I'll put that in the comments below. Make sure you watch their videos. It's a really good, simple explanation of everything, which I think is a really good thing because it is quite a complex subject. And what's interesting too is we were having a chat in the CPR Kids office about 6 months ago, and a lot of us had never heard of mammalian meat allergy. In the last month, 2 people, so one daughter of a team member and one team member have been diagnosed with tick-induced mammalian meat allergy.
Wow.
Like, what are the chances? So it is, it is becoming more prevalent. Now, Deb, is there anything else that you would like to add, or should I go into some first aid now and how to remove a tick?
I think I've talked about all the revolting stuff, and I think you need to talk about how we can stop it from happening.
Yeah, I get to talk about the fun practical stuff now, which is great. So first of all, let's talk about prevention, because prevention is always better than cure. I mean, we know that, but in the same token, you've got to get out, you've got to get outside, you've got to get into the bush. But know if you're in a tick area. It's easy enough just to do a Google search. You'll be able to tell if you are. There are plenty of maps out there on Google that'll show you if you are in a tick area. Now, wearing long sleeves and long pants when you're walking through the bush or doing gardening or something like that is really, really sensible, not only for, for sun protection, but also it's important for tick bite prevention as well. A really good look, particularly if you are out gardening and you have ticks in your garden, you've got the little ones helping you, tuck your pants into your socks. I know that that's a bit of a funny thing to say, but it actually really does help, because what they love to do is those ticks, they're waiting for you. They're waiting on the ends of those little bits of grass or whatever bush they're on, and they're waiting for you to come along. So if you're brushing past them, on your shoes, your legs, they are going to go up your trousers and they are going to find a nice warm spot to latch on. And they do like creases. So when you are searching for ticks, look behind the ears, look in the hair, look in the armpits, in the butt crack. Like, these are places that we really do want to be looking, because they're not always obvious. I've had a tick just right here on my shoulder. That was an easy one to find. Pulling the one out of my husband's butt crack was more interesting, but that is another story. Certainly when my kids have had Deb knows my husband, and so that's why I think she's probably laughing a little bit more here. My kids have had ticks too. When they've had ticks, they've had them either behind their ears or just on their necks. And what's really interesting is every time they've had a tick, because we are in the bush a lot, so it is something that, that does happen. The first thing they've said is they've got a sore head. My youngest said that she felt like she had a swimming cap on that was too tight. So that was a really interesting way of them being able to say, they didn't realize they had a tick, but they had that headache. So other things to do, wearing hats, wearing light coloured clothing, and particularly if you have or your child has a tick allergy, we need to be thinking about using repellent. That is something that we're not going to go into today. There's lots of resources out there, particularly on the Tiara site as well. So you can have a look there. But that's, something that you need to consider if you do have anaphylaxis with that. Now, that's a bit about prevention. Another thing that you can do too, when you've been bushwalking or gardening in a tick area, is when you get home, strip off, check them for ticks, really important. And you can throw your clothes in a hot dryer to kill any ticks that may be on there as well. So that can help. But what do you do if you discover you or your child has a tick? First of all, there are 2 things that you need to put in your first aid kit. The first one is this. It's a permethrin cream. Am I saying that right, Deb? Permethrin?
I said permethrin.
Permethrin?
But I also say, yeah,
whatever.
I don't know.
You just need it, okay? However you say it, you need it. You can buy this over the counter. So this is what you use for the little nymph ticks. So they're the tiny little ones that just look like spots on your skin. The other thing that you need is one of these. And this is a freezing spray. It is an ether-containing spray. You can just buy this over the counter from your local pharmacy. This one in particular is for freezing off warts. You can get those, or you can get one specifically that say tick on the boxes as well. It's the same stuff. Okay, so there's not really any difference. It is just a freezing spray, an ether-containing spray. So you need to have those two things. So what you're going to do for the nymph ticks, so you can see here are some that I drew earlier. We've got our little nymphs here. So there's little tiny ones that just look like dots on the skin. What you're going to do is you are going to put a nice big layer over the top here, and you're going to leave that on there, and that should kill the little nymph ticks, and they should hopefully be dropping off after that, after this has cleared. I want you to speak to your pharmacist about how long you need to leave this on for, and they will give you further instruction about what you should do. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing for the nymphs. Now the big guys, these are our real problem ones, because in the past it was said that we should use special tick tweezers or tick removers to pull the ticks out, that you could put maybe some metho, maybe a little bit of tea tree oil, things like that. And yeah, it may well kill the tick, but it's going to make that tick cranky. Okay, and when the tick gets cranky, what's going to happen is that they are going to inject more of that toxin-containing saliva, that allergen-containing saliva. So the idea is that we want to remove them without irritating the tick. We want to kill it in situ. So that's the important thing. We want to kill it quickly where it is. So to do that, what we're going to do, and I've got my nice big tick here, okay, we are going to get our ether-containing spray, and we're going to hold that about 1 centimetre above the tick, okay? We are going to spray this 5 times. Now, I'm not going to do it because I don't have a tick there and it will irritate my skin, because I've done that before and I ended up with with part of the skin coming off a little bit, because it is cold. It will do some damage, but we're spraying the tick, okay? So 5 squirts, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we're going to leave it for a few minutes, okay? Then ideally, if you've got a magnifying glass, or you can even use the photo or the camera on your phone and zoom in and have a look and see if the tick is still moving. If the tick is still moving, you're going to give it another 5 sprays, okay? 1 centimetre above, and then that should be enough to kill the tick. The tick should actually drop off by itself when it is dead. Now, if it doesn't, what Askia, who are the allergy gurus, the peak body, they say that if you have anaphylaxis or allergy with tick bite, then it's really, really important that you don't try and remove that dead tick yourself if it's not coming out, that you get a medical professional to do that, because even after the tick is dead, if you are squeezing that tick to pull it out, it can inject more of that allergen-containing saliva. So ideally, it just drops off by itself, and that's what we've had. We've been very lucky that when we have sprayed the ones here, that after 5 minutes, check them, not moving at all, 2 little dead ticks. My daughter called them Tiffany and Trevor, which was nice of her. And Tiffany and Trevor simply dropped off by themselves, and then we had no other issues. So what we don't want to do is squeeze. So if you remember nothing else, the catchphrase is freeze, don't squeeze. Really important. Don't let your kids scratch them, because what will happen is they're going to get cranky and inject more of their saliva. So making sure that we freeze, don't squeeze. Okay, so that is what we do to remove a tick. And remember, if you do have allergy or anaphylaxis, follow your action plan. Make sure it is up to date and follow it, and make sure that you've got these guys in your first aid kit. Okay, Deb, is there anything that you would like to add to that at all?
I guess the only thing, first of all, I'm very impressed that you've got such a tiny magnifying glass. And then secondly, I just wanted to say, I'm a huge fan of always preparing our children for what should happen. And I think, that when it comes to spraying that on them, if it is going to be uncomfortable, I think warn them, in a pragmatic, sensible way.
What's really interesting is that I have attempted to use this on a wart on my child, and she was like, no, that hurts, don't do it. But when I used this, the tick was rather large, and the tick copped the brunt of this, and she said it wasn't that painful. It was uncomfortable, but it wasn't that painful. Yeah, because the tick, by the time we kind of discover them, they are starting to get a little bit engorged as well. Not always, but the tick did bear the brunt of it. But be aware that if it is a little tick, that yes, their skin will definitely get some irritation from it. And be truthful. Don't tell them it's not going to be uncomfortable.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Be truthful. Really important. Now, does anybody have any questions for us? Please, now is the time to post them in the comments below. And the other thing that we would love you to do is share this far and wide, because the more people who know how to safely remove a tick, the better, because as we were saying before, the prevalence of tick-induced allergy and mammalian meat allergy is on the rise. We need everybody to know how to remove these ticks safely, okay, because without introducing more of that allergen-containing saliva. So if particularly where this is most prevalent at the moment is the northern beaches of Sydney. If you live in the northern beaches, can you please share this? Please make sure that everybody knows. Now, Deb, I don't think we've got any questions or comments today. So if that's it, if there's nothing else you'd like to add, then we might sign off for the day, and we will see you again next week. So make sure you DM us with any topics that you would like to talk about. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.